Cindy's, but no, not this morning. She's beat. Yep. We'll go ahead and get started. We don't have a lot of time left, but that's okay. Everybody was visiting, getting caught up. I don't know what people do that they don't go to church on Sunday. I guess they keep up with people electronically. Keeping up with people on Sunday morning, that's what you're supposed to do. That's what it's supposed to be done. Find out what's going on in the world. We're going to look a little bit more during class this morning on my, I'm going to just carry over the thought that I had in my sermon. How many of y'all think that the value of work or earning a living is something that's maybe a rare commodity today? What's happened there? Why is it? Well, that's definitely not something that is helpful. I will say this, and I didn't mention this morning, but I need to. Didn't have time. The other side of this thing is too, the laborer is worthy of his hire too. There's another side that can discourage people too. If people are working, they need to be paid a living wage. If they feel like they're just working and they're just going further and further in the hole, that's pretty discouraging too. And here's the deal too about that: not everybody can be a millionaire or hedge fund manager or somebody who's making $1 million a year. Society is held up by people too, and there was one of very, very few things that was brought about positively about the virus and the COVID virus. But I do feel like definitely for a year, maybe more, that there was a new or fuller appreciation for those members of our society who are making minimum wage or barely above that, and some of the stuff that they were doing to keep this country moving. Before that, there wasn't a whole lot of appreciation for it. But the people that are stocking your shelves and the people that are driving trucks and doing things that were keeping the country moving, they finally got a little bit of credit that they deserved, and because so often is the case, they did not. I see it a lot. Saw it at a restaurant a couple of weeks ago, and I don't know what had gone on, but a man just absolutely berating the server, who's probably, making minimum wage or barely above that. And you're like, well, I can understand if you got to put up with that. So, in fact, I saw a guy kicking the door at the Hardee's there on 231 South. I can't remember what morning that was, Thursday or Friday morning. The dining room was closed and just the drive-through was open, and I mean, he was just having a meltdown, kicking the door and banging on it. I'm like, here's the deal. There's two sides. People, especially Christians, we gotta want to work. We got to work. That's what we're supposed to do because it's just an inherent value of Christian living and the very essence of God Himself. We don't talk about it, but in order to be truly godly, we've got to work because God's a worker. He's a worker from the beginning. Man was placed in the garden to work. Jesus Christ was a worker, so we've got to do that. On the other hand, if you're in a position and you have people that are working for you and it's within your power to make sure that they're taken care of and they're paid a decent wage, don't be greedy and don't be stingy and hold back their wages, because you'll be judged for that too. There's a harsh judgment for holding back workers' wages. In fact, Jesus makes it pretty plain. The Lord of the Sabbath cries out for those that their wages have been withheld. So as Christians, we're supposed to have the right attitude for both. Hard work and willing to work, but also if you've made it and you put yourself by that hard work in a position where you can take care of other people, then take care of them. If they're good workers, then make sure they're not discouraged and you take care of them. So that's part of it too. There's just a few things I want to try to get over that I didn't really have time to include. Why does God, and obviously from the scriptures we looked at this morning, why do you think God expects us to work? I'm not talking about just necessarily in the church now. I'm talking about tomorrow when you go out and earn your living. Why does He expect us to work? Does He expect us to work? I hope I made that clear this morning. And if so, why? You can go all the way back to that. How about this, though? Do you think maybe people get so, is it just barely possible that people get depressed and down on themselves because people that work have a value or feel like there's an importance to their life because they're contributing to just society in general, not just their family, but society in general by their working. Now, if you take that away from somebody, have you taken away a pretty important part of somebody's life? I mean, you know somebody maybe who retired and their job, and I'm not saying, because I know folks that their job was who they were, and they might have been extreme cases. In fact, their whole identity was in their job, and I think that's wrong too. But know somebody who retired and maybe within a year, because they didn't have that, making them feel like they were important, died. Yeah, I do. And it's because you took away such a large chunk of their life and who they were. You know, how many of you feel like your job's important? Tomorrow, whatever you do, or that girl said, important. That's just a pet peeve of mine, y'all. There's a generation growing up, and it's like they don't want to say the whole word. Something's important, or I ain't go. There's another one. There's 2 or 3 words they use, but it's like, just say the whole word. How many of you feel like your job's important? Well, I think it's important. How many of you enjoy your job? How many of you have ever had a job that you did not enjoy? Then here's the deal about that, you know, and of course sometimes you gotta go through those kind of jobs to finally find the one you want. But if you finally reach the point that you're just absolutely miserable in a job, you know, then find another one. If it's barely possible and the economy's good enough, then find another job, because going through life and working in a job that you're not happy with, it affects your family. I've been there and done that. It affects your family. It affects your spiritual life. It makes you unhappy. It's important for Christians, whatever they've found to do, and as the scripture we looked at this morning, to do it with all their might and to be happy. How much easier it is it for you to be happy in a job that you like as opposed to one you don't like? That's a given. What's the old saying? If you can ever find a job or work that you like, you'll never have to work again, or something like that. You'll never feel like. There have been times I've felt like that, and there's been times, if you're like me, that you just absolutely dreaded, especially on Sunday night. I'd lay in bed like this at night, you know, and I love my cuckoo clock. I got a cuckoo clock, but the cuckoo clock, you'd lay there, and it would be in the den. I'd be laying in the bedroom, and I could hear it. I never, at 1 o'clock in the morning, I never could tell if it was 1 o'clock or like 12:30, because it only cuckoos once then too. So I'd be laying there, and he'd go, cuckoo. And I'm like, well, I'm still laying here awake, thinking about tomorrow. And then I'd wait, because I was like, well, if he goes, I got to wait for the 2 cuckoos, because I get 2. I know it's 2 o'clock. And sure enough, I'd lay there. About 3 or 4 o'clock, I'd finally doze off. And the next thing I know, the alarm clock's going on. I'm like, oh. And you go to work, and sadly, and again, this is something I should have talked about this morning, didn't have time. As Christians, you know, some of the things that I would worry about, like there'd be a meeting, or maybe I was going to have to maybe terminate somebody, their employment or whatever, I would think about that all weekend long. And Sunday night, it would be just like the culmination of that. And I'd worry about it, fret over everything. And not every time, but 90% of the time, it never was as bad as I thought it would be. How many work-wise have ever maybe laid in bed on Sunday night or whatever, thinking about it, and just lay up till early in the morning, thinking about what's going to go down? And sometimes it does, sometimes it don't, but getting so preoccupied with your work. Do you think maybe this is something else too, y'all jump in there. As far as we as a society goes, the people are teachers, firemen, police. If you looked at a salary, like on salary.com, are they the highest paid people in our, where do they usually fall? Low. Yeah, low. So what does that tell you as far as our compensation goes? Bus drivers, how about bus drivers? What does that tell you about where do we, as a society, what do we value then? Now, first of all, let me ask you this. Are those people's jobs important to the very fabric of our whole society? If you remove them, what would happen? It would come crashing down. So if that's the case, then why aren't they higher paid? I'm going somewhere with this. Why aren't they the higher paid ones? they're not going to complain. But as far as who's making rules in the salary line, these are people educated till they get old. Then they complain. Are you speaking from your experience or Christine's experience? Yeah. Well, and if you got husband and wife, that's what they're there for. The the the, the, the point I'm trying to make is this though. Let's measure it this way. If that's the case, money-wise or compensation-wise, and we're valuing them down here, what does it say about us? What are we valuing? Where are we placing our emphasis? We're not paying them what they're worth. Who do we pay? Who? Well, as far as schools are concerned, though, it could be people maybe higher up politically. There are certain trades and skills, y'all, that need to be compensated for because they went to school and they earned multiple degrees, and they whether it's doctors or lawyers or engineers or whatever. But how is often the case, a lot of people are making super big money, and society is willing to pay it because the market bears it. Not so much. Especially, I know several teachers, they've got just as many degrees and as much education as some of those folks. They're not making that kind of money. The point I'm trying to make is this: our society is driven by the money you make. I've even heard this even with members of the Lord's church. It's almost like your value by the job you have, your value as even a Christian, but even in society, is determined by, well, how much money do they make? How many of you have ever been asked by somebody, well, how much money does that job pay? Or how much money, your children, as they're growing up, what's the danger or where's the danger in maybe pushing them towards an occupation that makes lots of money? Is that everything? Well, sure. Well, sure it is. They do. And determine who makes what and when. And again, it just says, though, as far as the Lord's church is concerned, and we're supposed to be, as Christians, have a servant's mind, who should we value the most? Well, the ones that society says are paid the least. So it's just turned on top of its head again. I have seen, and don't get me wrong, their jobs are marketed in the way our economy works. I don't know that there's any way we can change that. But I was saying earlier, I think it was to Braden's grandparents, his grandfather. It's always struck me. When I did, there was a time where I guess I would have been considered white collar, working behind a desk, and of course, I was encouraged to do that because it made more money. And at the stupid time in the life I was when I was a younger man, I thought, well, that was all that. You work yourself up so you can get up there and you can tell other people what to do. Let me tell y'all something. If you're chasing that tail, when you get there, let me know how it works out. Because when you get up there, I spent about 15 years doing that. That was absolutely the most miserable time of my life. Absolutely the most miserable time of my life. I never felt like I got anything done. And those were the years I'd lay in a bed like this, wondering. I can tell you this much. I was over about 60 guys, different building trades and stuff. You may think you're a genius and you're all that, but I'm going to tell you, you get 60 guys, they'll tag team you. There ain't no way you go out and do them or outsmart them. Because they'll take turns. Just when you put out one fire with one, there'll be another one jump up. The happiest I've ever been is working with my tools. I like doing yard work. In fact, I got great comfort when I was working behind the desk on weekends or in the afternoons, just getting out in the yard and riding the lawnmower. I've solved a lot of problems riding the lawnmower. Or bush hogging. Bush hogging's good too. Bush hogging, you can solve a lot of problems there. You can get a little. Cindy always laughed at me, but I said, I'm telling you, sometimes that's just about, because you've got a job to do. It's got defined parameters. The field's this big, and when we get done with it, go back, I'm done with it. Otherwise, if it's a people problem and you're having to deal with people all the time, there is no solution. It never goes away. So, as Christians, I think it's important too for us to go back to what I read this morning about Adam. What was his job? was to tend the garden. Now, I don't want to read a whole lot into that, but we'll say this. I think that there's something that inherently is valuable about physical labor. A lot of folks don't like physical labor. Your job may require you to get behind your desk and work. You've got to have that. But I will say this. Try this if you haven't. And I'm not talking about, and there's a value to this, so don't get me wrong before anybody goes, round me. And you'll start seeing commercials about this again for long. These expensive exercise machines. I don't know how much a Peloton bike costs. Then they got this one, I think it's a mirror, and you can actually, other people can see you and you can see them. I don't want that when I'm working out. You know, if I want to sit down and have a drink or something. Well, you got one, Mark? I don't believe that. No. That's where I'm going. That's where I'm going with all the expensive exercise equipment. How many of y'all have bought some exercise equipment and you end up hanging your clothes on it? See, here's the deal about that. You know, exercise, that's all great and good. And hey, if y'all want to go run in the benefit run, that's great. It's a good cause. But how much is it worth maybe just to, like you said, Mark, just go out and do something, physical labor. You know, I know if you live in town or you don't have a place where you can work, that's problematic, but just come to your house. I just know you can get two things out of accomplishing a physical task. First, you can get the exercise that you can get and save you about $3,000 for not buying the Peloton. And plus, when you get done, you've done something. You can stand back and you can look, say, you know, well, I don't care if you're trimming hedges or weed eating or I don't care what you're doing, but there's something about that. I really believe, and this is just my opinion, and I've said this before because I've had a lesson about a year ago about this. I think we'd be a lot happier if we'd made time for some physical labor. If your job requires that, then great. But if it doesn't require that, make time for it. I think it's important because the job he gave Adam to do was going to require him to work. He's going to have to work a little bit. It's funny, Tucker, yesterday really wasn't that hot, but he wanted to go outside and play some ball, so we did. And after about 30 or 40 minutes, he started getting a little bit of perspiration. He said, "I'm hot." I said, "Yeah, you're hot because we're outside playing." He said, "I'm done." Took his little baseball glove up and threw it down. Wait a minute, we hadn't even got the football out yet, and he's going back in the house. He was hot. He was finished, and he's got a lot of learning to do, and he's just a little fella. But listen, you got folks out there in the world right now. They're not going to get hot and sweaty, and they're not going to work. It's just not going to happen. If you're like me growing up, that was just part of it. I didn't have a whole lot of choice as far as the jobs I could pick from when I was a teenager. The tobacco field and the hay field, it was hard. It was hard work, but that's all we had. I do know though that it was always better when our football practice 2-a-days would start in August. I was like, "Yay, yippee!" because I'm out of the hay field, and I'd go over and we'd be practicing in the morning, especially in the afternoon. Normally, some of the boys that had the jobs like sacking groceries or working at what was the name of that place? It's across from where the junior high. The place I went to junior high is the jail now. There was where David's Pizza is now. There was a burger joint there. Some of them worked there, but anyway, I never got sick. I never got heat exhaustion. I never threw up. Some of them boys did. That strawberry milkshake you had for lunch today, not so good now. But yeah, Jack. Yeah, what's the deal with that? Yeah. Yeah. You had loaded in what? The box. Yeah. We had one truck that would haul about 300 bales. It was a monstrous truck. I'll say this, though. I get back to the compensation thing. We had one old farmer in particular because Mr. Charles would send us all over the county picking up hay. We had one farmer. He had a little elevator with a gasoline engine that we put in the barn. He was so cheap he wouldn't buy gas for that. He makes us throw it up in the barn. And I'm talking about, really? his wife was the one too that had sulfur water, and first time I went, the other boys they knew. The first time I went, she made this big old pitcher of tea, and it was hot. She come out with a pitcher of tea, and big old, and it looked good. You know, it had the beads on it, just frosty looking and everything. She poured a big, and I had already probably, because I just guzzled it, probably 3 or 4 swallows before I'm like, whoa. Oh, it was awful. But paying, even a boy, there was a fellow that I hauled hay for. He's long since passed, but I was probably about 14, 15 years old. Dad would farm me out to other people. Went down there, and I don't know if you remember this or not, but I worked all day. I was young, very young, and the old farmer, him and his brother had a tractor and the baler and the wagon. And I'd stand on the wagon, and he'd go down the windrow, and the baler would shoot the bale out on the wagon, and I had to stack it on the wagon. I hauled almost 1,500 bales of hay that day, and I touched every one of them and threw them in the barn, too. Threw them up in the barn. And then today he gave me $5. I told him that. And then when fall come around, he was going to cut again. The guy called him and said, "No, I think I got something for him today." So it doesn't make any difference whether it's a teenager or whatever else. If they're doing work, pay them. Just give them the money they're worth. Don't be tight-fisted, because again, that's biblical too. God's going to be tight-fisted with you too. That's the way you live your life. So it's important for us to work. I think it's important for us to value each other's work. This thought in the church about not complimenting or bragging on each other if they've done a good job and you know they've done something that needed to be done in the Lord's church, whatever it is. It could be anything. We've had work days here before where we would paint the classrooms or we would do some yard work or whatever. If you're not able to do that, maybe physically, whatever, and you got brothers and sisters that do, or you couldn't show up, well, then tell them. Give them a pat on the back about it. But we just don't, until somebody dies. It's just to me a flaw in the Lord's church. It's like we wait till somebody dies before we want to tell everybody what they've done and brag them a little bit. There is nothing unscriptural about bragging on each other if you're doing the Lord's work. There's nothing wrong with it. Paul does it. When the churches that he'd write to, if they were doing good, he'd tell them about it. And he'd also tell them when they were doing bad too. But he'd make sure that it goes a long way. Our elders here, or deacons, if they're doing stuff or involved in stuff, just having that office, just the worry and concern sometimes that come along with having the office of an elder or deacon, just tell them you appreciate them every now and then. That appreciating somebody for the work they do, even in the workplace, definitely in the church, I think that's part of being godly too. I really do. I think sharing with people and encouraging people is something that we don't do. And I think that's why a lot of members of the Lord's church get discouraged, because all they do is hear the negative. Always hear the negative. Yeah, Mark? Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, that feeling, and since you mentioned that, it's such a terrible thing when you hear about young people either contemplating or actually going through with taking their own life. A lot of that has to do with they feel like that nobody loves them and that they're worthless, or that they've done something that they can't get forgiveness for, that there's some kind of character flaw they have that's worse than anybody else's. It is so sad to hear that. But again, a lot of that has to do with us maybe, looking into families and trying to be close and support. To reach a point like that in your life where you feel like you're just worthless. And I know it's not just young people, older folks too. When you reach a point in life where you feel like you're not doing yourself or anybody else any good, how bad a feeling is that? It's just not worth. I've said before. I know Cindy don't like me saying this. I know some useless people, but I don't know any worthless people. I know some people that are useless, but they're not worthless, because Jesus Christ died for everybody. But if you've been in the workplace and he's got more than 2 employees, one of them is probably more useless than the others. But definitely, if you have multiple employees, you've got some out there that are useless. I like the term. Then we'll quit. I like the term sluggard. Again, I think if we would reintroduce that, would it be biblical to call somebody a sluggard? It seems like it would be. If they're not doing what they're supposed to do. The word itself just I can picture this an ugly thing. Somebody who there's so many proverbs. If you want to read about work and lazy people or wise people and foolish people, just go to Proverbs and Ecclesiastes. You can come up with a lot. There's one, and I don't right now it escapes me, but I think it's in Proverbs that the sluggard or the lazy man is so lazy he won't even pull his hand out of his coat to take a bite to eat. That's pretty bad. I love the one that's there's a line in the street. That's one of my favorites. I got it highlighted in my Bible. I can't go to work. There's a line in the street. Actually, that's a better excuse than some of them I've heard. I've heard some that were even worse than that. But so, yeah, that's a take on a proverb. It's not in the Bible, but it's a take off of it's a kind of a paraphrased proverb. And, yeah. Oh, yeah, and it's not just teenagers. I'm going to tell you, well, this is total, and I have some games on my phone that I play every now and then. Why do you think all of the PlayStations and the games? Why do you think they're so popular? Yeah, it's fun, and you can whatever game you want to play, and recreation it has a place too. We need to recreate every now and then too. But if that's all you do, listen. Some of the stuff that I've read just in the last year, especially during the COVID pandemic, there were people, and I'm not talking about just young people, adults, spending up to like 12 and 14 hours a day playing those games. Like, wow. Yeah. And again, like I said, recreation has its place, but you do too. If you're spending 14, 15 hours a day, I don't care if there's a pandemic or not, I'm pretty sure there's probably some more productive things you ought to be doing. But again, it's just one of the things that our world and our society that's actually become a norm. I guess used to it was TV. We were throttled back on TV. Of course, back when I was that age, there were only 3 channels. Some of y'all remember that? Well, 4 if you counted PBS. You had that, and then but couldn't get it all the time where we lived because the rabbit ears would get all fuzzy. So that wasn't a big deal. But you got them now. I can remember in 1969 when they were landing on the moon. Y'all remember the storm? The storm came through and we didn't get him. He was about to step off, and then went. And then about 30 seconds later, he's walking on the moon. So we didn't get to see the rabbit ears went out. Yeah. Will you be a millennial? Gen X. Okay. Yeah. 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 Well, there were still, there's still kids that do that some now. Maybe. Hmm. One of the things, and then I'll quit. Maybe has something to do with the topic. Maybe not. I do know that one of the things that I think has happened to both young and old, because I'm just as guilty of it, the technology, talked about this some Wednesday night, the technology, there's a lot of information shared and a lot of technology out there, but our ability in the workplace or in the church to be able to communicate with one another has fallen off dramatically. There is no communication. You can share a lot of information, you can share a lot of technology, but us being able to work as a unit, face to face, shoulder to shoulder, and communicate with each other, we're in big trouble. And you don't have to look very far back in history to see what happens to cultures that drift away like that. We're probably the only one, because of the technology and where we are. That's probably something that's historically has never existed before. But you can see where if communications break down and people aren't able to converse with one another, share dialogue, discuss things openly, you're in big trouble. I think we're in big trouble. Now, technology's played a part in it, and I'm not real sure that it's the only part to play. Like those kids that just sit and all that, they imagine they're part of something, but they're really not, because the technology separates them from the actual person. Does that make sense? You don't have to deal with it. Yeah, Carol? Mm-hmm. Yep, for sure. It's not good. Yeah. But is this, I keep saying we need to quit. How about this though, Carolyn? Even though you make them maybe associate with you, if they've spent so much time away from person to person, how's the conversation go? Is there anything to talk about? Yeah. So he does talk. Cause I've got mom and dad. There's a nephew of mine, and he's a grown man, holds down a full time job, but he gets home at night. He might make him a drink, and all he does all night long is play video games. And you know, he does hold down a job, but that affects workplace too. It affects being able, and it affects marriages. It affects churches. It affects everything. Being together. Appreciate everybody's comments. We'll look at something different tonight. Like I said, this morning I just been thinking a long time about that the subject of work and what God says about it. Because the scriptures, if you want to look for yourself, Old and New Testament, it is eat up with scriptures about work, what you should work, how you should work, how you should view work. You know, it's amazing how many scriptures are on work. We just don't ever talk about it. I'm talking about what we got to do in the morning to go out and make a living. Anybody have anything else? No. Salt. They pay people in salt. The salt was very valuable. Yeah. No, seriously, they would do that. They paid Roman soldiers with salt. It no no other way to preserve stuff. So that's where it came from. Now we have too much of it. Yeah, Joe. Oh, man. Well, I can remember him. We had the rabbit ears, and if one of us had to take a station by the TV because we're going, we had to move it around or go stand over there. How many of y'all had a? How many of y'all had an antenna with rabbit ears and you had aluminum foil on it? Have you ever had a pickup truck and the antenna got broke off and put a potato with a coat hanger on it? Am I the only one that did that? It works until the potato dries out. I'm the only one. By the way, and I didn't say tomorrow, Monday, is Janice's funeral. I think I left the day of the week off this morning. Did I say it? Okay. Well, it's tomorrow. Visitation from 5 to 7, and then the funeral's at 7. And the deal with the ant and the grasshopper, y'all, did I confuse people? I wasn't talking about the Disney movie. I'm talking about the fable. Am I the only one that? Because I asked if anybody heard the fable. I'm like, I'm the only one that heard the fable of the grasshopper and the ant. So yeah, yeah, yeah. It was written probably about 300 BC. It's old. It's an oldie and passed on. Would y'all bow with me? Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for the day you've given us and the time you've given us to spend together. Be with us as we leave this place. Keep us safe and in your arms, and give us the peace of mind that passes all understanding. Thank you for Jesus, and in His name we pray. Amen. Jackson County with work.